The rulers agreed to exile Earth. Humanity didn't wait to be told twice. Part 1. The sky did not crack open. There was no explosion, no beam of light, no alien ship hovering over New York or Beijing. The message came quietly, slipping into every screen, every speaker, every radio wave on Earth at the exact same moment. Televisions in living rooms, phones in pockets, public address systems in train stations. All of them played the same voice. It was calm, smooth, and utterly cold. People stopped walking. Cars slowed to a halt. In Tokyo, a street vendor dropped his tray of dumplings. In Nairobi, children froze mid-laugh on a schoolyard. In Rio, a samba band missed a beat for the first time in decades. The voice spoke in every language at once, as if it had always known how to talk to each person in their own tongue. "You have been observed," it said. "Your species is volatile. Your history is soaked in conflict. Your technology grows faster than your wisdom. For the safety of the Galactic Concord and its member civilizations, Earth is hereby placed under quarantine. All human activity beyond your moon is forbidden. All attempts to contact other worlds will be met with immediate neutralization. You have 90 days to comply. After that, enforcement begins." The message ended. Screens returned to normal. Radios played music again. But nothing was normal. In Houston, Leo Grant sat alone in his cluttered garage, a half-built drone on his workbench. He had been tinkering with ion thrusters for years, dreaming of deep space probes that could outrun government tracking. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't even officially an engineer, just a mechanic with too many ideas and not enough sleep. But when the voice spoke, he didn't panic. He didn't cry. He just stared at the ceiling for 10 seconds, then grabbed a grease-stained napkin and started drawing. His lines were rough, but fast. A compact fusion core, a shielded comms array, a stealth hull made from recycled satellite parts. He knew what the Concorde didn't. Humanity had been preparing for this moment without even knowing it. For decades, backyard inventors, rogue scientists, and off-grid coders had built systems meant to survive collapse, whether from war, plague, or something worse. Now that something worse had arrived from the stars, half a continent away, in a quiet cabin outside Anchorage, Dana Ruiz heard the message through a crackling shortwave radio. She hadn't worn her flight suit in 7 years, not since the military grounded her after the Mars supply mission went sideways. But her hands still remembered the feel of thruster controls. Her eyes still tracked the sky like it owed her answers. When the broadcast ended, she walked to the shed behind her house, brushed snow off an old satellite dish, and turned 3 dials with practiced precision. Within minutes, a secure channel flickered to life. "Ghost Echo Actual, this is Raven 1, she said, voice low but steady. "If you're listening, it's time." Static hissed for a long moment. Then a voice, male, tired, familiar, answered. "Took you long enough, Dana. We've been waiting." She smiled for the first time in years. Across the planet, others were doing the same. In Cairo, a group of university students rerouted campus servers to mask data trails. In Buenos Aires, a retired shipbuilder began welding hull plates in his backyard. In Manila, a teenage coder uploaded a virus that would scramble any foreign signal trying to scan Earth's networks. No one had given them orders. No president, no general, no World Council had called for action. They simply knew what had to be done. The governments, meanwhile, were falling apart. Emergency meetings in Geneva, Washington, Beijing, all filled with shouting, blame, and fear. Some leaders begged the conquered for mercy. Others demanded war. Most just sat in silence, realizing how small Earth really was in the grand dark of space. But while politicians debated surrender, ordinary people were already moving. Leo's garage became a command post by nightfall. Friends showed up with toolkits, laptops, and stolen military schematics. They worked in shifts, welding, coding, testing. No one slept. No one asked why. They just built. Dana, now back in a flight jacket, coordinated with former pilots across 6 time zones, mapping out asteroid fields and blind spots in the solar system where ships could hide. She didn't call it a fleet. She called it a shadow. The conquered assumed humanity would obey. After all, every other species they'd exiled had done exactly that. Curled up, accepted their fate, and faded into obscurity. But humans were different, not because they were stronger or smarter, but because they had spent their entire history surviving the impossible. Ice ages, plagues, wars that should have ended them. They always found a way. And now, faced with cosmic exile, they didn't wait for permission to act. By the end of the first week, the first vessel launched. It wasn't a warship. It wasn't even armed. It was a modified cargo tug, painted matte black, carrying nothing but sensors and a single message. "We see you." It drifted toward Jupiter's orbit, where Concord scouts had been spotted. The aliens noticed it immediately, but before they could react, 3 more tugs appeared from different directions, then 6, then 12, each broadcasting false heat signatures, fake engine trails, phantom comms chatter. The Concord's scanners lit up with confusion. Back on Earth, Leo watched the data stream on a cracked tablet. "They think we're panicking," he muttered. "Good, let them." Dana stood beside him, arms crossed, eyes sharp. "They gave us 90 days, she said. "We're not going to need that long." No one knew what came next. But one thing was certain. Humanity wasn't waiting to be told twice. They had heard the verdict. Now they were writing their own sentence, and it didn't include surrender. The rulers agreed to exile Earth. Humanity didn't wait to be told. Twice Part 2. While world leaders argued in hushed rooms and news channels filled the air with fear, the real work happened in silence. Garages, basements, abandoned factories, and even old subway tunnels became hubs of quiet rebellion. No flags flew, no anthems played. But across continents, people moved with purpose as if guided by a single unspoken thought. We will not be erased. Leo and Dana no longer worked alone. Their small teams had grown into a loose but tightly knit network of engineers, pilots, hackers, and mechanics who called themselves Horizon. They didn't have a headquarters. They didn't need one. Messages passed through encrypted bursts over ham radio, through dead drop servers, and even old-fashioned paper notes left in library books. Trust was earned in actions, not words. Their goal was simple: make Earth look empty while making space look full. The Concorde expected panic or defiance. They did not expect misdirection on a planetary scale. In the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, Dana led a crew of former miners and cargo pilots. They flew old rock haulers with patched hulls and jury-rigged thrusters. Their job was not to fight, but to move. They nudged massive chunks of nickel iron into new orbits, creating shifting gravitational shadows where human ships could hide. They also launched hundreds of reflective mylar balloons, each no bigger than a suitcase programmed to drift in formation. From a distance, they looked like a fleet of warships powering up. Back on Earth, Leo coordinated the tech side. He and a team of students from a community college in Portland had turned a decommissioned weather satellite into a signal mirror. It bounced fake distress calls, phantom engine noises, and scrambled telemetry across the solar system. To the Concorde's listening posts, it sounded like humanity was scattering in every direction, some fleeing toward Alpha Centauri, others hiding in the Oort cloud, a few even broadcasting surrender messages from fake lifeboats. None of it was real, but all of it was believable. The beauty of their plan was its simplicity. They used what they had: old parts, forgotten tech, human stubbornness. A retired schoolteacher in Kansas built decoy drones from drone racing kits and kitchen foil. A fisherman in Norway repurposed sonar buoys into deep space pingers that mimicked ship signatures. In Lagos, a group of street artists painted entire rooftops to look like scorched landing pads, complete with fake blast marks and melted metal, just in case the Concorde sent eyes from orbit. Government still floundered. The United Nations issued a formal plea for mercy. The Concorde ignored it. Some nations began building underground bunkers as if that would help against starfaring enforcers. Others shut down their space programs entirely, hoping to appear harmless. But Horizon didn't wait for permission. They operated outside all official channels, moving faster than bureaucracy ever could. One night near the edge of Saturn's rings, a Concorde scout ship detected a large energy spike. Sensors showed a human vessel, massive, dark, bristling with weapons, powering up near Titan. Alarms blared across the Concorde command net. Battle groups shifted course, but when they arrived, there was nothing. Just a cluster of solar sails, angled perfectly to catch the sun and reflect a blinding flash that mimicked a reactor surge. The warship was a mirage made of light and timing. Dana watched the feed from a hidden relay station near Pluto. She allowed herself a small smile. "They're chasing ghosts," she said. Leo, back in Houston, was already planning the next phase. He knew the Concorde would eventually realize the deception, so Horizon had to stay one step ahead. They began moving real assets, not people but tools. Fusion cells, water recyclers, navigation cores. All of it was being ferried to hidden caches in the Kuiper Belt, buried inside icy dwarf planets or tucked into the shadows of dead comets. These weren't escape pods. They were seeds. If Earth fell, humanity would still have the means to grow again, somewhere far from watchful alien eyes. But the real surprise was happening on the planet itself. While the conquered watched the skies, Earth was going quiet, not in defeat but in strategy. Cities began dimming their lights in rotating shifts. Factories ran at night with sound-dampening covers. Air traffic was rerouted through mountain valleys to avoid radar. Even social media went dark, not by force but by choice. People stopped posting. They stopped streaming. They stopped calling. The digital noise that once screamed humanity is here slowly faded into static. Satellites were reprogrammed to point their lenses downward, not outward. Weather drones now monitored soil moisture and crop health instead of scanning for ships. To any observer from space, Earth looked like it was shutting down. Forests grew over old roads. Rivers reclaimed floodplains. The biosphere, for the first time in centuries, began to breathe again. The conquered took notice. Their long-range scans showed declining CO2 levels, fewer artificial heat sources, and a sharp drop in radio emissions. Their analysts concluded that humanity was collapsing under the weight of despair. Some even suggested the quarantine was unnecessary. Earth would soon be a dead world anyway. They were wrong. Beneath the surface, in tunnels and labs and shielded bunkers, humans were building something new. Not weapons, not bombs, but systems, resilient, self-sustaining, invisible. Geothermal taps were drilled deep into the crust to power hidden grids. Algae farms in abandoned mines produced oxygen and food. Quantum-entangled comms, developed in secret by a group in Reykjavik, allowed instant messaging across the solar system without broadcasting a signal. Horizon wasn't running away. They were preparing to disappear completely, not by leaving Earth, but by making Earth itself vanish from the galaxy's view. Dana flew a final scouting run near Neptune, checking the placement of the last decoy array. As her ship coasted through the icy dark, she looked back at the pale blue dot far behind her. It looked fragile, small, but she knew better. That dot held billions of minds, all working together without a single order from above. No general had commanded this. No president had signed a declaration. It was just people. Ordinary, stubborn, brilliant people, refusing to be written out of the story. Leo, standing in his garage under a single hanging bulb, finished wiring the last sensor node. He wiped grease from his hands and looked up at the night sky. Somewhere out there, alien ships waited, but down here humanity was already gone, not in body but in presence. They had become ghosts before the conquered even knew to look for them. And the best part? The conquered still thought they were in control. They had given humanity 90 days to comply. But humans had never planned to obey. They had only planned to survive. And survival, they were learning, did not always mean fighting. Sometimes it meant becoming invisible. Sometimes it meant letting your enemy believe they've already won. The silent exodus was not about leaving. It was about staying quietly, fiercely, and forever out of reach. The rulers agreed to exile Earth. Humanity didn't wait to be told. Twice Part 3, by the time the Concord's calendar marked day 60, the solar system looked like a graveyard. No signals pulsed from Earth. No ships darted between the planets. Even the old space stations hung dark and still, their solar panels folded like closed eyes. To alien sensors, humanity had vanished, not in a blaze of glory, but in a slow, quiet fade. The Conquered Command declared the operation a success. Patrol rotations were reduced. Scouts were recalled. The galaxy moved on. But in the cold void beyond Neptune, something stirred. 300 human vessels, some barely more than welded scrap. Others, sleek and silent, drifted in loose formation near the edge of the Kuiper Belt. They called themselves the Ghost Fleet, not because they were dead, but because they refused to be seen. Their hulls were coated in radar-absorbing foam made from recycled insulation. Their engines ran on cold gas thrusters that left no heat trail. Their comms stayed dark unless absolutely necessary. When they did speak, it was in bursts so short and coded that even if intercepted, they sounded like cosmic noise. Leo stood on the command deck of the lead vessel, a retrofitted deep-range ice hauler named Wanderer. It wasn't pretty, smelled of oil and stale coffee, but it worked. Around him, volunteers, teachers, truck drivers, former astronauts, monitored screens showing fake fleet movements. They weren't lying about their location. They were lying about their size. Using solar sails, drone swarms, and precisely timed engine flares, they made it look like thousands of ships were gathering for a final stand near Saturn. In truth, only a few dozen were there. The rest were illusions painted across space with light and math. Dana piloted a scout skiff at the fleet's edge, watching for conquered patrols. She wore a patched flight suit and kept a thermos of black coffee strapped to her belt. Her job was simple. If an alien ship came within 5 million kilometers, she would trigger a decoy burst, a flash of energy that mimicked a warp core breach. The Conquered had already fallen for it twice. Each time they sent rescue drones to investigate a disaster that never happened. Each time they wasted fuel, time, and attention. Back on Earth, the silence deepened. Cities ran on minimal power. Streetlights stayed off. Cars were parked and covered. Farms used hand tools instead of tractors to avoid engine noise. Children learned in quiet classrooms with paper books. Radios played only local music, never news. The world had gone into a kind of hibernation, not out of fear, but focus. Every watt of energy, every gram of metal, every drop of fuel was being saved for what came next. Underground, the real work continued. In a bunker beneath the Rocky Mountains, scientists tested a new kind of atmospheric cloak, a fine mist of engineered microbes that absorbed and scattered specific light wavelengths. When released, it would make Earth's biosignature look like that of a lifeless rock. In Siberia, engineers drilled into geothermal vents to power a planetary-scale signal dampener. In the Amazon, botanists cultivated fast-growing vines that could cover satellite dishes and radar towers in weeks, hiding them from orbital view. The plan wasn't just to hide. It was to disappear so completely that the Concorde would forget Earth was ever worth watching. On the Wanderer, Leo reviewed the final phase. In 3 days, they would launch the grandest illusion yet. Every decoy, every drone, every fake signal would converge near Jupiter, creating the image of a desperate last-ditch armada preparing to break the quarantine. The Conquered would see it as a threat. They would send their main fleet to crush it. And while they were distracted, Earth would vanish for good. Dana returned from her patrol and climbed aboard through the airlock. Her face was tired, but her eyes were sharp. "They're buying it," she said, handing Leo a data chip. "Scans show 3 dreadnoughts turning toward the Jovian zone. They think we're making our move." Leo nodded. "Good. Let them think we're stupid enough to fight." They weren't fighting. They were performing. Every human in the Ghost Fleet knew their role. Some flew drones that mimicked fighter squadrons. Others broadcast fake distress calls in broken alien tongues. A few even staged mock battles between decoy ships, complete with explosion simulators and debris fields. It was theater on a cosmic scale, and the audience was an empire that had never seen a lie so big. Meanwhile on Earth, the final preparations began. Families packed emergency kits not to flee, but to survive the blackout that would follow. Hospitals ran drills for off-grid care. Power grids were switched to manual override. And in every major city, teams stood ready to release the atmospheric cloak at a moment's notice. No one knew if it would work. The microbes had only been tested in labs. The signal dampener had never run at full power. But they had no choice. Day 90 was coming. And when it did, the Conquered would expect either total surrender or open war. They would not expect silence so deep it felt like emptiness. On the night before the big show, Leo walked the length of the Wanderer, checking seals, testing comms, talking quietly with crew members. Most were scared. Some were excited. All were ready. He found Dana on the observation blister, staring at the distant sun. "You think they'll ever come back?" she asked. "Maybe," Leo said, "but not for a long time. And when they do, we'll be ready," she nodded. "We're not hiding forever. Just long enough to grow stronger." Exactly. The next morning, the Ghost Fleet sprang to life. Drones launched in waves. Solar sails unfurled like wings. Fake engine trails lit up the void near Jupiter. The Concorde's sensors lit up like a holiday tree. Alarms rang across their command ships. Battle formations locked into place. They saw what they wanted to see, humanity's final foolish charge. But as their fleet surged forward, Earth held its breath. In Houston, a technician flipped a switch. In Nairobi, a farmer released a canister into the wind. In Oslo, a scientist pressed enter on a terminal. Across the planet, the cloak activated. The microbes rose into the upper atmosphere. The signal dampener hummed to life. Streetlights that had stayed on for decades finally went dark. From orbit, Earth began to fade. Not all at once. Not dramatically, but steadily like a photograph left in the sun. The green of forests dulled. The blue of oceans grayed. The heat bloom of cities cooled. Within hours, the planet looked ancient, cold, and dead. The ghost fleet kept up the show for another 12 hours, then vanished, shutting down all systems, drifting into the shadow of a dwarf planet, becoming just another piece of space junk. When the Concord arrived at Jupiter, they found nothing but empty space and a few melting mylar balloons. Confused, they turned their sensors back toward Earth and saw only silence. The rulers agreed to exile Earth. Humanity didn't wait to be told. Twice Part 4, the Concord scouts arrived at Earth's orbit on day 88, moving slowly, almost cautiously. Their ships, sleek, silver, and humming with quiet power, circled the planet like vultures unsure if their prey was truly dead. Sensors swept the surface again and again. They looked for heat from cities, radio chatter from towers, the chemical breath of life in the air. They found nothing but rock, wind, and still oceans. Vexer, the crystalline emissary who had delivered the original decree, stood on the command deck of the lead dreadnought, his facets dim with what might have been disappointment. He had expected resistance. He had prepared for war. Instead, he found silence so complete it felt like a tomb. Scans showed no power grids active, no vehicles moving, no voices. Even the great data networks that once pulsed with human thought were gone, replaced by static. One of his lieutenants, a gelatinous being from the Cygnus arm, pulsed a soft blue. They are gone. Either they fled into the void or they destroyed themselves in despair. Vexer did not answer right away. He watched the planet turn below, its clouds drifting without purpose. It looked like every other dead world the Concord had catalogued over millennia. No different, no threat, just another failed experiment in evolution. Scan the moon, he finally said. The moon returned the same result. Empty. The old landing sites were buried under dust. The flags had long since faded. Even the footprints were gone. Satisfied, Vexer gave the order. Quarantine confirmed. Begin withdrawal. As the Concord fleet turned away, engines glowing faintly as they accelerated toward the outer rim, a single transmission slipped through the void. It was not encrypted. It was not hidden. It was broadcast on an open frequency, the kind any ship could pick up. The voice was calm, human, and carried no fear. You told us to leave. We chose to stay. And now you'll never find us again. Vexer heard it. He did not react. But deep in his core, something shifted. Not doubt, yet but curiosity. He filed the message away and said nothing. Back on Earth, the words had already done their work. In Denver, Leo and Dana stood on a grassy hill outside the city, wrapped in thick coats against the autumn chill. Below them, the skyline was dark. No neon signs. No streetlights. Just the soft glow of stars above and the quiet hum of the world breathing again. Around them, others gathered. Engineers, farmers, teachers, pilots, all watching the sky, waiting. Far beneath their feet, in a chamber carved into solid granite, the final switch had been thrown. A network of geothermal taps linked to orbital mirrors and atmospheric resonators, activated in perfect sync. The system didn't hide Earth with smoke or mirrors. It bent light, scattered signals, and masked biosignatures by making the planet mimic the quantum noise of empty space. To any scanner, Earth wasn't cloaked. It simply didn't register as anything worth noticing. It wasn't magic. It was physics, patience, and the kind of cleverness that only comes when survival is the only goal. In the days that followed, life on Earth did not return to normal, because normal had been the problem. Instead, people built something quieter, slower, and stronger. Cities ran on local power, solar, wind, geothermal. Food came from rooftop gardens and underground farms. Communication happened through mesh networks that couldn't be traced from orbit. Children learned astronomy not to reach the stars, but to understand how to stay hidden among them. The ghost fleet, now scattered across the outer solar system, went dormant. Ships powered down to minimal life support. Crews rotated in shifts, sleeping in cold bunks, waiting. They were not gone. They were watching. If the Concord ever returned, they would be the first to know. Leo spent his days in a small workshop beneath a library, refining the phase shifting fields calibration. Dana trained new pilots in mountain valleys, teaching them to fly without radar, to navigate by starlight alone. Others worked on new projects, water purifiers that needed no power, seeds that could grow in any soil, medicines brewed from common plants. Humanity was not waiting for rescue. They were becoming self-sufficient in a way they never had been before, and they were not alone. Across the planet, people shared what they had. A farmer in Iowa sent grain to a community in Louisiana. A doctor in Mumbai taught remote surgery techniques over encrypted audio. A musician in Dublin played songs on a hand-carved flute, and the sound traveled through underground cables to lift spirits in Reykjavik. There was no money, no governments, no borders, just need and the will to meet it. The conquered had assumed exile would break humanity. Instead, it had forged them. Months passed. Seasons turned. Snow fell on silent cities. Rivers ran clean. Forest crept back into suburbs. The planet healed, not because humans left, but because they changed. And still the conquered did not return. Rumors began to spread through alien trade lanes. Some claimed Earth had vanished from star charts. Others said their sensors glitched whenever they pointed toward Sul. A few whispered that the humans had not died. They had become ghosts, haunting their own world, waiting to strike. The conquered dismissed it as superstition, but patrols near the solar system grew fewer. Then none at all. On Earth, no one celebrated. They knew the peace was temporary. The galaxy was vast, and empires did not forget easily. But for now, they had time. Time to heal. Time to learn. Time to build something that could last. Leo stood again on the hill one evening, looking up at the stars. Dana joined him, handing him a cup of hot tea. "They think we're gone," she said. "We are," he replied. "Just not the way they think," she smiled. Good. Below them, the world slept. But it was not dead. It was waiting. And somewhere in the dark between the stars, Earth had become the one thing the conquered never expected. Invisible not because it was weak, but because it was wise. The rulers agreed to exile Earth. Humanity didn't wait to be told twice part 5 time passed. Not in years, but in quiet moments. The Concord moved on, folding Earth into their archives as a closed case, a species that had burned too bright and faded too fast. Their patrols no longer swept the edges of the solar system. Their traders avoided the Sol sector, calling it cursed. Even their scholars stopped mentioning humanity in lectures. To the galaxy, Earth was a ghost story told to young cadets, a warning about what happens when a race grows too fast and too loud. But ghosts, as it turned out, could build things. Deep in the asteroid belt, Dana Ruiz guided a sleek, needle-shaped vessel through a field of tumbling rock. Her ship, the Vigil, was nothing like the patched-together haulers of the Ghost Fleet. It was built from lessons learned in silence, sleek hulls that bent light, engines that left no trail, sensors that could hear a whisper across 1 billion kilometers. She wasn't alone. Around her, a dozen similar ships moved in perfect formation, all built in hidden shipyards carved into dead comets or buried under Martian dust. They called themselves the Watchers now, not because they feared the Concord, but because they understood it. Leo, back on Earth, stood in a sunlit workshop surrounded by humming machines. The phase-shifting field still held, keeping the planet hidden, but it was no longer their only shield. On his workbench sat the core of humanity's first true interstellar drive, a compact fusion pulse system that could reach nearby stars in under a decade. It wasn't meant for escape. It was meant for choice. For the first time in history, humans could leave not because they were forced, but because they wanted to. The conquered had assumed exile would end humanity. Instead, it had given them space to grow. Without the noise of war, politics, or endless consumption, people had turned inward and upward. Underground universities taught quantum physics using chalk and blackboards. Children built radios from scrap metal. Farmers shared seeds that could grow in Martian soil. The world had not collapsed. It had simplified, focused, and become stronger, and it was no longer alone. The Watchers had been busy. For months they had drifted near alien trade routes, listening, learning. They mapped conquered supply lines, recorded patrol patterns, and even intercepted low-priority data bursts. They learned that the conquered was not a single mind, but a fragile alliance of 17 species, each with its own fears and secrets. Some had once been exiled themselves. Others resented the conquered's control. Humanity was not the first to be silenced, but they might be the first to return. One evening, Dana received a signal from a relay near Proxima Centauri. It wasn't alien. It was human. A small colony, built from a single seed ship launched during the early days of the quarantine, had survived. They had no weapons, no fleet, just a dome on a frozen moon and a garden under glass. They had heard the silence from Earth and assumed the worst. Now they heard the Watcher's coded ping and answered with a single word: alive. Leo got the message an hour later. He didn't cheer. He didn't cry. He just nodded and added another line to his star charts. The Conquered began to notice strange things. Patrol ships near the Oort cloud reported phantom signals, brief, human-like, then gone. A mining outpost on the edge of known space found a derelict drone floating in orbit. Its memory core wiped clean except for one phrase etched in binary: "We remember." Trade ships swore their sensors glitched when passing near Sol. As if space itself bent to hide something, rumors spread faster than facts. Some aliens claimed Earth had become a weapon. Others said humans had merged with machines and now lived as energy beings. A few whispered that the planet was a trap, waiting to swallow any who came too close. The truth was simpler. Humanity was just watching and waiting. Then came the day a conquered scout vanished near Neptune. No explosion. No distress call. Just silence. At first, the conquered assumed a malfunction. But when a second ship failed to check in a week later, panic stirred. High Command ordered a full investigation. Battle groups were reassembled. Sensors scanned the outer system for weeks. They found nothing. No ships, no weapons, no signs of life. What they didn't know was that the Watchers had perfected stealth not just in ships, but in tactics. They didn't destroy the scouts. They disabled them quietly, towed them into deep ice caves, and erased every trace. The Conquered wasn't being hunted. They were being tested. Back on Earth, children played under open skies. Crops grew in fields once paved with concrete. Rivers ran clear. The planet healed. Not because humans left, but because they learned to live with less. And in hidden labs, new ships took shape. Faster, smarter, built not for war, but for the long journey ahead. Leo stood on the same hill outside Denver where he and Dana had watched the Conquered leave. The stars above were the same, but everything else had changed. He held a small device in his hand, a beacon, simple and strong. It could broadcast a signal across light years. He hadn't turned it on yet. He was waiting for the right moment. Dana joined him, her flight suit worn but clean. "They're scared now," she said. "Not of us. Of what they don't understand." "Good," Leo replied. "Let them wonder." They both knew the Conquered would return one day. Empires do not like mysteries. But when they came back, they would not find a broken species begging for mercy. They would find a quiet world that had chosen its own path, and beyond it, a fleet that moved like shadows among the stars. Humanity had not won a war. They had skipped it entirely. They had turned exile into advantage, silence into strength, and invisibility into power. The galaxy thought they were gone, but they were just getting started, and somewhere in the dark, Earth waited, not as a victim, but as a promise that even the smallest species, when left alone, could become something the stars would never forget.